My husband got his girlfriend pregnant and told me to stay quiet. What would you do if your husband asked for permission and then ignored your answer anyway? In today's shocking Reddit story, an open marriage turns into emotional chaos when a girlfriend crosses a line that changes everything. Stay till the end, because the final decision will leave you questioning everything about love, loyalty, and boundaries. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman telling this story. Not in a million years. Because if you had asked me 10 years ago what my marriage would look like, I would have said stable, predictable, safe, but life doesn't always stay inside the lines you draw, and sometimes, you're the one who erased them. My name is Rachel, I'm 38 years old. I live in a quiet suburb outside Chicago. I have 2 sons, one in high school, one in middle school. And I have a husband, who just got another woman pregnant. And somehow, I said yes to it. Let me explain. My husband, Mark, and I have been together since we were 22. We built everything together. First apartment, first real jobs, late night arguments about money, early morning laughs over coffee. We weren't perfect, but we were solid, the kind of couple people assumed would last forever. We had our first son at 25, our second at 28. Life got busy, routine took over, and somewhere in the middle of diapers, school runs, and work stress, I started feeling like something was missing. Not from Mark, from me. It started small, a thought here, a curiosity there. I realized I was attracted to women. At first, I ignored it, told myself it was just a phase. But it didn't go away. So one night, I told him. I expected anger, confusion, maybe even rejection, but Mark just sat there quietly and said, "If this is something you need to explore, we'll figure it out together." That moment changed everything. We opened our marriage, carefully, slowly, with rules. It wasn't reckless. We talked about boundaries, expectations, what was okay, and what wasn't. At first, it was occasional. A few shared experiences, a few experiments, and honestly, it worked, for a while, but then something shifted. I realized I didn't want to keep exploring. I missed the simplicity of us. So I told him, "I'm done, I don't want this anymore." And Mark, he surprised me again. He said, "That's okay, but I'd like to keep seeing someone, if you're alright with it." I thought about it, really thought about it, and eventually, I said yes. Because I trusted him, because I believed in us, because I thought I had control over where this would go. That's when she came into the picture. Her name was Sarah, 40 years old, successful, confident, the kind of woman who walks into a room and owns it without trying. He met her through work connections. And from the beginning, there was something different. She didn't hide. She didn't act like a secret. She wanted to meet me. And weirdly, I agreed. We met at a cafe downtown. I remember watching her walk in. Perfect posture, calm smile. She looked at me like I wasn't a threat. Like we were equals. She said something I'll never forget. "I'm not here to replace you." And at the time, I believed her. Their relationship settled into a routine. One weekend a month, occasional trips, a few texts here and there. It never interfered with our family. Mark was still present, still a good father, still, my husband. And honestly, I started getting comfortable, maybe too comfortable. Then came that night, the night everything changed. It was a Saturday evening. Sarah texted Mark. She said she wanted to meet both of us. Dinner, neutral place, no details. I didn't think much of it. I should have. We met at this upscale restaurant downtown. Dim lighting, soft music, the kind of place where conversations feel heavier. Sarah was already there when we arrived. Calm, composed, too composed. We sat down, ordered drinks, made small talk, and then, she dropped it. Just like that. No build-up, no hesitation. "I want to have a baby." I remember blinking, thinking I misheard her, but she kept going. Calm voice, steady tone. "I want Mark to be the father." Silence, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I looked at Mark. He looked just as shocked as I felt. She explained it like it was simple, like it was logical, like it made sense. She said she didn't want to wait for a husband. She didn't want to risk missing her chance. She wanted a child, and she wanted it with someone she trusted. With him, she said, nodding at Mark. "He's a good man, a good father." And then she looked at me, straight into my eyes, and said something that hit harder than anything else. "But only if you're okay with it." That moment, that was the trap, because suddenly, it wasn't just her decision, or his, it was mine. Mark spoke first, still stunned. He said, "This is Rachel's decision, 100%, and just like that, the weight landed on me. If I said no, was I ruining his happiness? If I said yes, was I destroying my family? And then the worst thought of all crept in. Quiet, ugly, impossible to ignore. What if she gives him a daughter? Because I always wanted one. But we stopped at 2. Life got busy, time moved on, and now, another woman might give him something I couldn't. I smiled that night, nodded, acted calm, but inside, everything was breaking, because deep down, I knew this wasn't just about a baby. This was about boundaries, power, and the moment your open marriage stops being something you control and starts controlling you. And I had no idea that the next conversation with my husband would change everything. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, calm, confident, certain. I want to have a baby with your husband. Who says that? Who sits across from a wife and says that like it's a normal conversation? Mark barely spoke on the drive home. Neither did I. The silence between us wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like something had shifted, and neither of us knew how to fix it. When we got home, the house was quiet. The kids were asleep. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. I walked into the kitchen, turned on the light, and just stood there. Mark came in a few seconds later. He looked tired, confused, but not angry, and that bothered me more than anything. I turned to him and asked the only question that mattered. What do you think? He didn't answer right away. He leaned against the counter, ran his hand through his hair, and then he said something that hit me harder than I expected. I didn't know she was going to say that. That wasn't the question. I know, I said. But what do you think now? Another pause, longer this time, and then, he said it. I mean, I love having kids. My stomach dropped. He kept going, like he didn't realize what he was doing. Or maybe, he did. If it was just up to me, I'd probably say yes. There it was. The truth. Simple, clean, brutal. I felt something inside me crack. Not loudly, not dramatically, just, quietly, like a glass that finally couldn't hold the pressure anymore. But it's not just up to you, I said. He nodded, quickly, almost too quickly. I know, that's why I said it's your decision. That sentence, that one sentence, it sounds respectful, but it's not, because when someone says, it's your decision, but you already know what they want, it's not a choice, it's pressure. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time that night, I felt angry. Don't do that, I said. Do what? Don't pretend this is all on me. He frowned, like he didn't understand, or didn't want to. I'm not pretending, he said. I mean it. If you're not comfortable, it won't happen. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt ridiculous. You just told me you'd say yes if it was your decision. He didn't deny it. So if I say no, I continued, I'm the reason you don't get to have another child. Silence. Again, that was my answer. I turned away from him, tried to steady my breathing, but my thoughts were spiraling. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about Sarah anymore. This was about my husband. The man I trusted, the man I built a life with, the man who was supposed to be on my side. And now, he was standing in the middle, trying to keep both worlds. I need you to be honest with me, I said. I am being honest. No, I said, turning back to him. I need you to be completely honest. He looked at me, serious now, focused. Do you want to have a baby with her? This time, he didn't hesitate. Yes, just one word, but it felt like a punch to the chest. I nodded slowly, trying to process it, trying to stay calm. Okay, I said, then let's talk about reality. He straightened up, like he knew this part mattered. Because this isn't just about what you want, I continued. This affects me. It affects our kids. It affects our entire life. I know, he said quietly. Do you? I asked, because if he really knew, would he still be considering it? She said it would be like she's a single mom, he added. That I'd just visit, be involved, but not fully responsible. I stared at him, in disbelief. You actually believe that? He hesitated, and that hesitation said everything. Mark, I said, my voice shaking now, there is no such thing as a half-responsibility child. He didn't argue, but he didn't agree either. And that's when I realized something terrifying. He wasn't thinking about consequences. He was thinking about desire. I need time, I said. Take all the time you need, he replied. But time doesn't fix everything. Sometimes, it just makes the truth harder to ignore. The next morning, I still felt sick, emotionally drained, mentally exhausted, but I knew I couldn't avoid this. So I sat him down again, looked him straight in the eyes, and gave him two options. Clear, simple, non-negotiable. Option 1, I said. We separate, you go be with her. Have your baby, build whatever life you want with her. His expression changed immediately. He didn't like that option. Not even a little. Option 2, I continued, you get a vasectomy. He blinked, caught off guard. You can still see her, I added. I'm not asking you to be monogamous. But there will be no baby. Not with her, not with anyone. The room went silent. For a moment, it felt like everything stopped. Because now, the choice wasn't on me anymore. It was on him, and deep down, I already knew which one he didn't want. But I didn't know yet which one he would choose, and what that choice would cost us. He didn't answer right away. Not that night, not the next morning either. And honestly, that silence told me more than words ever could. Because when someone knows what they want, they don't need time. They hesitate. When the truth has consequences. The house felt different that day. The same walls, the same furniture, the same routine, but underneath it all, there was tension, thick, unspoken, waiting. Mark still helped with breakfast, still joked with the kids, still acted like everything was normal. And that made it worse, because I knew what was coming. I just didn't know when he'd finally say it out loud. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was him, a text. Can we talk tonight? Simple, neutral, but I could feel it. This was it. All day at work, I couldn't focus. Every scenario played in my head. Every possible outcome. Maybe he'd choose us. Maybe he'd realize this was too much. Maybe he'd finally understand what he was risking. Or maybe he wouldn't. When I got home, the kids were in their rooms. The house was quiet again. Mark was already there, sitting on the couch, waiting. I didn't sit. I didn't soften the moment. I just stood there and said, "What's your decision?" He looked at me, took a breath, and then he said it. "I've been thinking about it all day." My heart was racing. "I care about you," he continued. "And I care about our family." That word again. Care, not love, not commitment. Care. But, he added, there it was, the word that changes everything. But I also care about her. I felt my chest tighten. And I want to have more kids. That was it. No hesitation. No apology. No attempt to soften the impact. Just the truth. I think I want to go through with it. The room went completely silent. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there. Because sometimes the pain is so sharp. It numbs everything else. "So that's your answer," I said quietly. He nodded. "I believe we can make this work." I almost laughed. Again, "You believe we can make this work?" I repeated. "Yes," he said, more confident now. "I won't neglect you. I won't neglect the kids. Nothing has to change. Nothing has to change. Except everything already had. You're about to have a child with another woman," I said. "How does that not change anything?" "I'll manage my time," he replied quickly. "I'll visit them. I won't bring the baby into our home if you're not comfortable." I stared at him, trying to understand how he could say this. Like it was a scheduling issue. Like this was just another appointment to fit into his calendar. "This isn't a hobby, Mark," I said. "This is a human being." "I know that," he said. "And I want to be part of that child's life." "And what about our life?" I asked. "I'm still here, aren't I?" That answer broke something in me. Because being physically present is not the same as being emotionally committed. "You're asking me to accept this," I said slowly. "I'm asking you to trust me." "No," I said, shaking my head. "You're asking me to sacrifice my peace so you can have everything." That hit him. I could see it, but not enough to change his mind. "I don't see it that way," he said. Of course he didn't, because from his perspective, he wasn't losing anything. He still had me. He still had his kids. And now, he'd have another child too. "I told you my boundary," I said. He looked at me, quiet, waiting. "If you go through with this, I will file for divorce." There it was, out in the open, no taking it back. He didn't panic, didn't raise his voice, didn't try to stop me. Instead, he said something that I'll never forget. "Why?" Just one word, but it carried so much weight. "Why?" he repeated. "What are you trying to achieve with a divorce?" I stared at him, stunned. "You'll see the kids half the time." He continued. "You'll move out. We'll spend money on lawyers." "For what?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You already have freedom," he added. "You can see other people. Nothing is stopping you." I felt anger rise in my chest. Hot, sharp. "This isn't about freedom," I said. "This is about respect. I respect you," he insisted. "No," I said firmly. "You don't, because if he did, he wouldn't be standing here, trying to convince me that this was normal. That baby is happening," he said finally. And just like that, everything became clear. It didn't matter what I wanted. It didn't matter what I felt. The decision had already been made. "I just think divorce is unnecessary," he added. Unnecessary. Like my feelings were an inconvenience. Like my boundaries were optional. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Then we're done," I said. And for the first time, he looked unsure, because now, this wasn't a discussion anymore. This was the consequence, and neither of us knew just how messy things were about to get. I thought the hardest part was telling my husband I was done. I was wrong. The hardest part was telling our kids we didn't plan to do it that soon. Not like that, not in the middle of everything falling apart. But once the word, divorce, was said out loud, there was no hiding it anymore. That evening, we sat them down in the living room. Same couch, same place we'd had 100 normal conversations. But this one felt different, heavy, final. My oldest sat with his arms crossed, already suspicious, already tense. My youngest, he was on his phone at first, barely paying attention. I wish I could say we handled it perfectly, that we chose the right words, that we protected them, but the truth is, we didn't. Mark started talking, explaining, trying to sound calm, controlled. "There's something we need to tell you," he said. I sat there quietly, listening, watching, waiting. He told them about the open marriage. How it started, why it started. I saw my oldest's face change immediately. Confusion, then discomfort, then anger. Wait, what? He said. You were seeing other people. Mark nodded. And you knew about it? He asked, looking at me. I nodded too. That's when the shift happened. Because suddenly, we weren't just parents anymore. We were people they didn't recognize. Why would you do that? He asked. There was no good answer. Not one that would make sense to a teenager. My youngest finally looked up. Is this why you're getting divorced? He asked. I opened my mouth to answer. But Mark spoke first. No, that's not the reason, he said. And then, he said it. Someone I've been seeing, wants to have a baby. Silence. For a split second, no one moved, and then my oldest snapped. You're kidding, right? His voice wasn't just angry. It was disgusted. You're going to have a baby with another woman. He continued. While you're still married to mom. Mark tried to explain, tried to stay calm. It's more complicated than that. No, it's not. My son cut him off. It's actually pretty simple. It's messed up. I flinched, not because he was wrong, but because of how right he was. This is embarrassing, he added. This is actually embarrassing. Those words hit hard, for both of us. My youngest, on the other hand, just shrugged. Okay, he said, so I'll have a half-brother or sister or something. The contrast between them was unreal. One was furious, the other, completely unfazed. Do you even care? My oldest snapped at him. What? My youngest said. It's not my baby. That argument started right there. Loud, messy, emotional, and in that moment, I realized something painful. This wasn't just affecting me and Mark anymore. This was tearing through our entire family. Eventually, we had to separate them. Send them to their rooms. Let things cool down. But nothing really cooled down after that. Later that night, Mark's parents called. Apparently, he had already told them. Without asking me, without warning me, and his mother, she was furious at me. I picked up the phone, and before I could even say hello, she started. This is your fault, she said. I froze. You opened this marriage, she continued. You allowed this. Allowed. Like I created the situation. Like I invited this chaos into our lives. I didn't ask him to have a baby with someone else, I said quietly. Well, what did you expect? She shot back. You gave him permission to see other women. That conversation didn't last long. Because there was nothing I could say that she was willing to hear. When I hung up, I felt exhausted, drained in a way I'd never felt before. Because now, it wasn't just my marriage. It was my kids, my in-laws, my entire life, getting pulled into something I never agreed to. Later that night, I sat alone in the bedroom. Mark came in. After a while, today was rough, he said. I didn't respond. They'll adjust, he added. I looked at him, slowly. You really believe that? Yes, he said. Kids are resilient. Maybe they are, but that doesn't mean they should have to be. This isn't just an adjustment, I said. This is a complete change to their reality. They'll understand eventually, he insisted. I shook my head. No, I said softly. They'll remember, and that's what scared me the most. Because some things don't fade, they stay, in the back of your mind, in the way you see people, in the way you trust, or don't trust. And I didn't know yet what this would do to them, or to me, but one thing was clear now. There was no going back. Only forward, and the next step would decide everything. The next morning, I woke up feeling empty. Not sad, not angry, just numb, like my mind had finally hit its limit. The house was quiet. Mark had already left for work. The kids were getting ready for school. No one mentioned what happened the night before. Not a single word, but it was there, in the silence, in the way my oldest avoided eye contact, in the way my youngest acted like everything was normal. That's when I knew I couldn't stay stuck in emotions anymore. I needed facts. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I called a lawyer. Just saying the words felt unreal. Hi, I'd like to schedule a consultation. Even the receptionist didn't sound surprised. Because for them, this is just another day. Another broken marriage. Another story. But for me, this was my entire life. The appointment was that afternoon. I almost canceled twice. Because part of me still hoped something would change. That Mark would come home and say he made a mistake. That he chose us. That this was all just temporary insanity. But deep down, I knew better, so I went. The office was clean, quiet, professional, the kind of place where emotions don't matter. Only outcomes do. The lawyer greeted me with a polite smile, sat me down, and asked a simple question. How can I help you? I didn't know where to start, so I just said the truth. My husband wants to have a baby with another woman. He paused, just for a second, not shocked, just processing. Then he nodded. Okay, he said, let's talk about your options. Options, that word again. But unlike Mark, this wasn't emotional. This was practical. He asked about our income, our house, our savings, the kids, every detail, every number, every responsibility. And slowly, the reality started to sink in. If you file for divorce, he explained, you're likely looking at shared custody. 50-50, half the time with my kids, half the time without them. That alone felt like a punch to the chest. You may need to move out, he continued, depending on how assets are divided. Move out, leave the house where my kids grew up. You'll also need to consider legal fees, he added, especially if things become contested. Money, time, stress, all of it stacking up. And what about him? I asked quietly. What about him? The lawyer replied. He's going to have another child, I said. Does that affect anything? The lawyer shook his head. Not directly, he said. That's his separate responsibility. Separate, that word felt wrong. Because nothing about this felt separate. It felt connected, messy, complicated. He'll still be responsible for your children, the lawyer continued. But the new child won't change your custody agreement. I nodded slowly, trying to absorb everything. So what would you recommend? I asked. He leaned back slightly. That depends on what you want, he said. Simple question, impossible answer. Because what did I want? I wanted my life back. But that version of my life didn't exist anymore. If your priority is stability for your children, he added, you'll need to weigh that against your personal boundaries. Stability, boundaries, two things that suddenly felt like they were pulling in opposite directions. Divorce isn't just emotional, he said. It's logistical, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't a clean escape. It wasn't a simple solution. It was a trade-off. Pain, for a different kind of pain. Loss, for a different kind of loss. When I left the office, I sat in my car for a long time, just staring at the steering wheel. Because for the first time, I wasn't thinking about what was fair. I was thinking about what I could survive. That night, Mark came home late. He looked tired, but not conflicted. That part was over for him. Did you talk to a lawyer? He asked. I nodded, and he pressed. I took a deep breath. It's not simple, I said. I told you that, he replied. Of course he did. Shared custody, I continued. Splitting assets, legal fees. He nodded again. Exactly, he said. That's what I've been trying to explain. I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. He wasn't fighting for us. He was arguing against consequences. You don't get it, I said quietly. Then help me understand, he replied. This isn't about money, I said. It's about what I can live with. He didn't respond right away. Because deep down, he already knew the answer. I don't want her in my life, I said. You won't have to see her, he replied quickly. That's not the point. Then what is the point? He asked. I looked at him, straight into his eyes. The point is, you're choosing her. He shook his head immediately. No, I'm not. Yes, I said. You are, because actions speak louder than words. And his actions, they were loud. I'm choosing to have another child, he corrected. With her, I said. Silence. That silence said everything. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully accepted before. No matter what I chose, I was going to lose something. The question was, what was I willing to lose? And what was I willing to keep? Because the next decision I made would define the rest of my life. I didn't make the decision right away. Not that night, not the next day, because this wasn't something you rush. Not when every option feels like a loss. For the next few days, I moved through life on autopilot. Work, home, kids, repeat. Mark didn't push, not anymore. It was like he already knew what I was going to say. And that made it worse. Because it felt like the ending had already been written. And I was just catching up to it. A week later, I started therapy. I didn't go because I felt broken. I went because I needed clarity. Because my thoughts, they were loud, messy, contradicting each other every second. The therapist was calm, experienced, the kind of person who doesn't rush you to speak. At first, I didn't even know where to begin. So I just said the simplest version of the truth. My husband wants to have a baby with another woman, and I don't know if I should stay or leave. She nodded, like she'd heard complicated stories before. How do you feel about it? She asked. That question should have been easy. But it wasn't. Angry, I said. Confused, scared, and then, after a pause, I added something I hadn't said out loud before. Jealous. The word hung in the air. Heavy, uncomfortable. Jealous of what? She asked gently. I hesitated, but I didn't avoid it. What if she gives him a daughter? I said quietly. I always wanted one. There it was. The thought that had been sitting in the back of my mind the whole time. Not logical, not fair, but real. The therapist didn't judge, didn't dismiss it. Do you feel like you're being replaced? She asked. No, I said quickly. Because that wasn't it. Mark wasn't leaving me. That was the problem. He wants both, I said. And I don't know where that leaves me. She nodded again. Then maybe the question isn't what he wants, she said. Maybe the question is, what you're willing to accept. That stuck with me, because up until that moment, everything had been about him. His choices, his desires, his future. But what about mine? What if I stay, and I regret it? I asked. Then you'll leave, she said simply. I blinked. It's not a life sentence, she continued. You're allowed to change your mind if your boundaries are crossed. That idea, it shifted something in me. Because I had been thinking of this like a final decision. A permanent one. Stay forever, or leave forever. But what if it wasn't that simple? What if staying was just staying for now? That night, I sat with that thought. Turned it over in my mind. Again and again. And slowly, a different kind of clarity started to form. Not perfect, not comfortable, but clearer than before. When Mark came home, I was ready to talk. We sat down at the kitchen table. Same place where everything had started falling apart. I've been thinking, I said. He nodded, listening. Careful now. I'm not okay with this, I continued. His expression tightened slightly. But, I added, that word again, but I'm not ready to lose everything either. He didn't speak, didn't interrupt, so I kept going. I'll give you my consent, I said. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth. Heavy, uncertain, but there are conditions. Now he leaned forward, focused. Go on, he said. If this affects our life, I'm gone. He nodded immediately. You don't bring her into our home, I continued. You don't prioritize that child over our kids. I won't, he said quickly. And if I feel like I'm no longer important to you. I paused, made sure he understood this part. I will leave. No discussion. This time, he didn't answer right away. Because now, it wasn't just about what he wanted. It was about what he might lose. I understand, he said finally. I studied his face, trying to see if he really meant it. Trying to see if this would actually work. But the truth, I didn't know. I still don't. Because sometimes, you don't make a decision because it's perfect. You make it because it's the only one you can live with right now. And maybe that's what this was. Not acceptance, not approval, just survival, a way to hold on to what I could, while everything else was changing. And as strange as it sounds, for the first time since that dinner, I felt a little bit of peace. Not because things were fixed, but because I had chosen something, and now, all that was left, was to see what that choice would bring. Once I said yes, everything moved faster than I expected. Too fast. There was no long waiting period. No gradual adjustment. It was like the moment I gave my consent. The clock started ticking, and then, almost immediately, she got pregnant. I remember the day Mark told me. He came home early. Unusual for him. I could tell something was different. Not bad, not exactly, but significant. She's pregnant, he said. Just like that. No build-up, no soft landing. And even though I knew this was coming, even though I had agreed to it, hearing those words out loud, it still hit me hard. I felt my chest tighten, my thoughts scatter, but I didn't react the way I thought I would. I didn't cry, didn't yell, I just nodded. Okay, I said quietly. Because what else was there to say? This was the reality I had chosen. Or at least, the reality I had accepted. How do you feel? He asked that question again, and just like before, there wasn't a simple answer. I don't know, I admitted. Because I didn't. Part of me felt calm, like I had already processed this moment before it even happened. And another part felt something I didn't want to name. Something sharp, something uncomfortable, but I pushed it down. Because I had made my decision. And now, I had to live with it. Over the next few weeks, things started to settle into a strange kind of normal. Mark kept his routine, work, home, kids, and then, her. But something unexpected happened. She made a decision, one that changed everything again. She's moving, Mark told me one night. I looked at him, confused. Moving where? Back to Canada, he said. That caught me off guard. Why? I asked. She wants to be closer to her sister, he explained. Especially with the baby coming. I nodded slowly. That made sense, but it also changed things. A lot. Distance has a way of doing that. So what does that mean for you? I asked. I'll still be involved, he said. I'll visit, call, be there when I can. When you can, I repeated. Because now, this wasn't just complicated, it was limited, and maybe, that made it easier, or maybe, just different. She also said something else, he added. I waited. She wants to eventually find a partner, and get married. That surprised me, and, I asked, and when that happens, she'll probably end things with me. Silence. I didn't expect that, not after everything, not after the baby, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. She never wanted a husband. She wanted a child, and now, she was getting one. So this was never permanent, I said. No, he replied. That word should have brought relief, but instead, it made everything feel even more complicated. Because if it wasn't permanent, then what was it? A phase, a chapter, a temporary arrangement with permanent consequences. How do you feel about that? I asked him. He paused. I understand it, he said. But I could see it in his face. He wasn't unaffected, because even if this wasn't forever, it still meant something, and letting go of that wouldn't be easy. Meanwhile, the kids were still adjusting. My youngest, still excited, he started asking questions about the baby. Names, dates, random things. My oldest, the opposite. He made it very clear. I don't want anything to do with it. And honestly, I didn't blame him. Mark respected that. He didn't push, didn't argue, but I could tell, it hurt, because this wasn't just about gaining something. It was about losing pieces of what we already had. Even my in-laws got involved again. My mother-in-law, still confused, still emotional, but now, she had a new focus. Maybe it'll be a girl, she said one day. I forced a smile, because that thought still lingered, even after everything, and I hated that it did. As the weeks went by, life found a rhythm. Again, not the same rhythm as before, but something manageable. Therapy helped a lot. It gave me space to say things I couldn't say anywhere else, to process emotions I didn't fully understand. And slowly, very slowly, I started to feel something I didn't expect. Acceptance, not because everything was okay, but because fighting reality was exhausting, and letting go, even a little, made it easier to breathe. But deep down, I knew something. This wasn't over, not even close, because a baby changes everything. And when that baby finally arrives, there's no more distance, no more, we'll figure it out. Only reality, and I had no idea yet what that reality would look like, or how much it would test everything I thought I could handle.
Time has a strange way of moving. Some days feel endless, heavy, like you're stuck in a moment that won't pass. And then suddenly, weeks go by, months, and before you realize it, you're standing at the edge of something you once feared. And it's finally here. That's what it felt like. As her due date got closer. November. That was the timeline. And even though I had months to prepare, to process, to accept, nothing really prepares you for reality. Because reality doesn't ask if you're ready. It just happens. The day she went into labor, Mark got the call early in the morning. I could tell immediately. The way he moved, the way his voice changed. It's time, he said. Just 2 words. And suddenly, everything felt real. Not theoretical, not emotional. Real. You should go, I said. And I meant it. Because no matter how complicated this situation was, that child was still his. He nodded, grabbed his things, and before he left, he paused, like he wanted to say something, but didn't. Then he walked out, and just like that, I was alone. I sat there for a long time. The house felt quiet, too quiet. The kids were at school. The world outside was moving like nothing had changed. But inside, everything had. Hours passed. I kept checking my phone. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. Was I supposed to care? Was I supposed to stay distant? Was I supposed to act like this didn't matter? And then, my phone buzzed. A message. It's a girl. I stared at the screen. Read it again, and again. A girl. Of course it was. Out of everything, that was the one thing I didn't want to happen. And yet, there it was. Real. Unavoidable. I didn't cry, but something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not jealousy. Something quieter. Something harder to explain. Maybe it was acceptance. Or maybe, it was just letting go. Later that evening, Mark came home. He looked exhausted, but also different. There was something in his eyes. Not regret, not guilt, something softer. How is she? I asked. She's good, he said. Tired, but happy. And the baby? He smiled slightly. She's healthy. Silence settled between us, because now, there was nothing left to imagine. This wasn't a situation anymore. It was a fact. Over the next few days, things slowly adjusted again. Mark stayed involved. Calls, updates, photos, but he respected the boundaries. He didn't bring the baby home. Didn't push me to be involved. And I appreciated that, more than I expected. My youngest was excited. He wanted to see pictures, asked questions, talked about her like she was already part of his life. My oldest, still distant, still firm in his decision. I don't care, he said once. She's not my problem. And as much as it hurt to hear that, I understood. Everyone processes things differently. Even my in-laws calmed down. Though my mother-in-law still had her moments. She finally got her granddaughter, she said one day. I didn't respond, because some comments aren't worth the energy. As weeks passed, life found a new balance. Not perfect, not simple, but stable. Mark kept his word. He showed up. For me, for our kids, and for her, but in a way that didn't completely disrupt our lives. And slowly, I started to believe something I didn't think was possible. Maybe this could work, not because it was ideal, but because we were making it work. Therapy continued, and with it, came clarity, not about everything, but about one important thing. I wasn't stuck. I wasn't trapped. I had chosen this, and if it ever stopped working for me, I could choose differently. That thought, it gave me peace, not the kind of peace that comes from everything being perfect, but the kind that comes from knowing you still have control over your life, even in the middle of chaos. So where does that leave us now? We're still together, still navigating this complicated, unconventional, messy version of a family. Some days are easy, some days, not so much, but overall, life is Okay, and maybe that's enough, because not every story ends with a perfect solution. Some stories end with understanding, with compromise, with learning how to live with choices you never thought you'd make. And maybe the real question isn't, was it worth it? Maybe the real question is, what would you have done?